Good evening and welcome to the October 28th special meeting of Council. The City of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their territory upon which we gather with gratitude. This evening we have the staff presentations on the 2016-2020 Draft Provisional Financial Plan. After the presentation of the Provisional Financial Plan, we'll go to the audience for public input, and then we'll go to council deliberations. I want to remind everybody this is the first budget meeting. There will be others, so it's not a do or die this evening. And if there's any questions and people want more information, there definitely will be other meetings. So please keep that in mind. So, Mrs. Lovegrove, would you please start the presentation of the 2016 to 2020 Draft Provisional Financial Plan, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just before we get started, everyone has a handout package, and I'll just go through it just to make sure everybody's got the handouts that have been provided to you. So the first one is a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, correct. The second one is this. It is a copy of the proposed 2016 budget in comparison to the existing 2015 revised budget for all of the departments.
Okay.
The next handout is a single sheet. It is budget adjustments that we have put into the budget that were not backed up with any spending packages. The next item is a list of all the spending packages, which are new items, new services, and new positions that have been introduced into the budget, into the financial plan, actually. And the last one is a copy of the changes due to the capital review process that we undertook earlier this year. So it's just a summary of the changes of the capital program.
Okay.
So those are your packages.
All right.
Okay. What I'm presenting tonight is the 2016 to 2020 Draft Provisional Plan. This plan builds on the plan that we had last year, which was a 2015 to 2019 plan. So the spending packages and the budget adjustments are in addition to what we basically already looked at last year. So to start off with, we'll look at all three funds. We'll start with the General Revenue Fund, and then we'll go to the Water Fund and then to the Sewer Fund. And in each of those funds, we will look at the building blocks, the 2015 future year spending packages, if any of them apply, any budget adjustments to each of the funds, any of the 2016 spending packages in each of the funds. We'll have a brief look at the total cost for the 20-year capital for each of the funds, a look at the 2016 provisional plan for each of the funds, and then the accumulated surplus levels. Sorry. So we'll start off with the general fund. So for the general fund, basically the plan that you have in front of you right now has tax increases of 4.5% in 2016 and tax increases of 4% for the remainder of 2017 to 2020. The inflation rate used in this model is 2% for 2016 and 17, and 2.5% after that. It includes staffing additions, and basically it also the capital program changes have given an increase of $10.1 million over 19 years compared to the same period of the last financial plan. So last year, when we did the provisional plan last year, we did have some spending packages that came forward that basically had an impact on this year and future years. Those spending packages are the Community Park Master Plan Review for $50,000, succession planning amount for the Fire Department of $18,000, and an engineering summer student of $16,000 a year for the years 2016 to 2020. Those items have been included in the amounts of the budget that you are seeing tonight. Other budget adjustments have come forward. For some reason, they may or may not have had a spending packages. These ones do not have a spending package. For 2016 only, included in the budget is a revenue from the Western Economic Diversification Grant of $72,000, and that is to help offset the PCCC renovations that are going on for the next 2 years. On the expenditure side, we have included $50,000 for a CAO succession plan, $5,200 for admin training at the SADA Business School, $10,000 for HR training for an OHS Master's Program, $6,000 for health and welfare wellness initiatives, $15,000 for miscellaneous labor consultations, $5,000 for training for an in-house facilitator for the Insights program, and $55,000 of unused vacation payout for the retiring fire chief. Then we have some budget adjustments which affect 2017 to 2020. Again, we have in 2017 revenue from the Western Economic Diversification Grant for an additional $69,225, and again for the PCCC renovation projects. Then we have an increase in a bylaw officer position of 0.4 FTE, full-time equivalent. In 2017, we also put in an amount of $25,000 for Canada's 150th birthday in case we would like to do something special for that event. The miscellaneous labor consultations are also in the budget every year for $15,000 for the full 5 years of the program. And in 2017, we have started to include the RCMP 17th officer. The full amount is $117,600, but in 2017, it's approximately $88,000 because it's only for 3/4 of a year. Certainly.
Yes, you may.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of things. Did the RCMP request another officer?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Greer, this has been in the budget for several years. It has been pushed out for several years, and it is now at the point where 2017 is the farthest year it has been pushed out to, so it is now coming forward into this budget.
I see. So, but they haven't really asked for it.
Director of Finance.
Thank you, Your Worship. I did ask Brian, the police chief, and he said yes, they would like to have another officer. They do push it out. They do understand our budget constraints. I said, do you need another officer? We need one now, he says, but he understands the budget constraints. So 2017 was fine with him, but he would like another officer.
Just one other question. Maybe explain the bylaw officer increase, $31,500.
When I get into my next part of the spending packages, there's also an increase for an emergency program coordinator of 0.6. The bylaw officer 0.4 and the emergency coordinator position of 0.6 basically go together to make one full-time position because of the changes within the bylaw department and the emergency coordinator. They want to make the emergency coordinator position a full-time position. We currently have a 0.4 position with the city staff right now. And the other point, that person who's doing that is a 0.6 bylaw officer, so we will have to bring the bylaw officer up as well. So it's bringing in one full position in order to accommodate the restructuring of the emergency program coordinator and the bylaw officer.
Okay, thank you.
So just for clarification, the diversification grant is for the year 2017 only?
Sorry, Councillor Oates. Your Worship, through to Councillor Oates, the Western Diversification Grant is over 2 years. It's 2016 for $72,000 and 2017 for $69,225 for a total of $141,225.
The $31,500 is for each year, 2017 to 2020. The same question for labor consultations and RCMP officer. I understand that the 150 is just for 2017, but the rest of them that's the amount that's being projected for the budget for each of those years.
Correct.
Thanks.
So moving forward, we've got several spending packages that came forward and have been brought into the budget, into the financial plan for this time. They include a bylaw enforcement officer. I'm not going to go over all the amounts, I'll just go over the list. An e-commerce configuration for the Tempest software, a part-time accountant. In the fire department, we have a request for parking lot lighting, a casual position, Class 3 driver's licensing, replacement of pavers, instructors conference, and standby pay. In Parks and Public Works, they had a request for the laborer. You will see that we're shown as 0 at this point. We feel this can be absorbed by the existing budget because the further spending packages of drought management and stream and foreshore maintenance, which is at the bottom, also have salary implications that would affect this position. So the rest of the salary can be absorbed into the current budget. So then we have a demolition of 183 McVickers, the conversion of the PCTC fountain, and LED streetlight replacement. So these are all in the 2016 part, and for a total of $364,000. Moving on to the spending packages that affect...
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. Can you just refresh my memory on the demolition of 183 McVickers Street?
Yes, through Your Worship, 183 McVickers Street. That's one of our derelict buildings that we're looking at. It is up for council's consideration. We don't have any use or future plans for that, nor do we have any capital further investigation or further capital enhancements for that building that is required. Capital meaning roof replacement, HVAC replacement, and there's no plans to rent it. So the plan is right now, again, for council's consideration to either demolish it, and then it's council can do so with the property, either sell it or make room for other use as required.
Councillor Patterson? Okay.
I'll have further questions later, what we could do with it.
There'll be time for questions later. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the spending packages that affect future years, in 2017, there's a request for an IT summer student. The emergency program coordinator of 0.6 FTE, that was the one I just explained a little while ago. The fire department would like a full-time assistant.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm just looking back. We've got on this one a 0.6 emergency coordinator, and then we have a 0.4 bylaw officer, and we right now have a 0.6 bylaw officer and a 0.4 emergency coordinator. And then also you want another, this bylaw enforcement officer is also going to be, so that's 2 full bylaw officers. Okay.
Did you? Director of Finance.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to clarify, by the end of 2017, if these positions were approved, we would have 3 bylaw officers, because we currently have 1.6, and we're adding a 0.4 and a 1. So a 1 in 2016 and a 0.4 in 2017. So we'd be up to 3 at that point in time with 1 full-time emergency program coordinator as well.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Okay, the fire department is looking for a full-time assistant in 2017. They're looking for funds for a 75th anniversary celebration event, a paid call system implementation, and then there's also a Parks and Trails master plan slated for 2017. In 2018, there's 2 staffing positions slated, which will, of course, carry through for all of the areas, and that's an HR advisor and a new engineering technician. And then in 2020, we have the demolition scheduled for the Shelley Road building. So the cost of those spending packages in the operating side are $485,995. So on to the capital in 2016. We have a new vehicle for the bylaw officer. We have, in the fire department, is requesting funds for a training tower. We have in the community park a sports field cistern request. And also in the community park, we have a request for volleyball bleachers. And then we have a request for Highway 19A and Wells Street sidewalk refurbishment, mostly on Highway 19, but curving around into Wells Street. And those capital requests are totaling $636,000. Then we have some capital requests for future years. So in 2017, the community park is looking for playground resurfacing and a water park cistern. There's also a request for bulk fuel storage and backup generator at the Public Works area. In 2018, in the community park, a mobility challenge access ramp has been requested. And in community park, the Arbutus Point kiosk and plaza development is in the budget for that. We also have built into the budget pickleball courts, and at Springfield Park, a playing field cistern. In 2019, the community park is looking at the plaza, which is basically for the Sandcastle expansion. And then the District 69 track and field facility, the city portion, is listed there. In 2020, we have a spending package for the community park clubhouse and washrooms building. And in 2024, I know 2024 is out of the realm, but we wanted to bring this to the attention of council. An all-weather playing field has been requested. We've also got in the budget this has been requested for about $2 million. We have also put in the budget in 2024 $1 million for grants and have identified this project as being contingent on receiving grants or it will not go ahead. So including all the spending packages, both minor capital and major capital, for the next 20-year period, this is the total of all the capital, minor and major capital projects. So overall, in the 20 years, we're looking at a total of $86.2 million in total capital projects. The upper part of the screen shows the departments and the amounts for each department over the years, and the lower part shows the funding sources, whether they're coming from general operations, grants, DCCs, or what have you. So that's just for your information.
Sorry, just for clarification, so you've already put the adjustments in here? So the RCMP doesn't have any RCMP officer in there. Is that just an oversight?
Your Worship, through the Council of Power, this is minor and major capital. The RCMP is actually operating. So yeah. So based on that information, we put the numbers into the model, and this is what the 5-year plan will look like as far as net income from operations. So in 2016, you can see our total funding sources are $17 million. Our total expenditures are $16.6 million, for a total net income from operations of $344,843. In 2017, that increases to 598, and in 18, 19, and 20, it does increase. That's just from operations. Then the second part of that is the non-operating budget items, which includes the capital expenditures, long-term debt principal payments, reduction of debt, and the amortization. So at the end of the day, we have either a surplus or a deficit, which is then offset by our unrestricted surplus. So as you see at the bottom line, the financial plan surplus has basically come to a balanced budget because everything is covered for in our accumulated surplus. So just to present council with an idea of where the money is being spent as far as the operating goes, we've just got a little graph here of the types of expenditures. So your labor expenditures, 48%. Insurance and office supplies are 4%. Contract servicing is coming in at 37%. Supplies and materials at 7%. And then you've got your debt and your grants, which are 1% and 3%. The next graph is actually the same graph, except it includes all the capital expenditures as well. So your percentages change a little bit. Your labor stays the same as far as the cost, but it actually drops down to 41%. Your contract services increases in both cost and percentage, and it goes up to 42%. And your supplies and materials also increase in percentage and costs by going up to 11%. The rest basically stay the same. So that's just an information graph so you can get an idea of where the money has been spent. And then for the general fund, after all of that information is taken into consideration, and at the end of the day, at the end of 2016, we would have an unrestricted surplus of $5.9 million. And then carrying through to 2020, you'll see we will actually deplete a lot of our reserves and go down to $391,000. We'll make a comeback in 2021, but then go down again in 2024. And these are based on, again, the 4.5% tax increase in 2016, 4% for the rest of the financial plan, and all the items that we have just gone through have been included. And that's the results of the surpluses. So that's it for the general fund. So if there's any questions on the general fund at this time?
I think we'll move on, and we can come back to this later.
Okay, I'll move on to the water fund. So again, in the water fund, the building blocks, the capital plan assumes Plan B of the ERWS treatment and intake program, which is the 16 megaliter per day capacity plan. Grants included in this budget in 2016 and 2017 are $2.2 million each year. The long-term borrowing included in the plan is $2.9 million in 2016 and $2.7 million in 2017. There were no 2015 spending packages that affected the water fund, so we'll go directly to the 2016 budget adjustments. And those are basically a 2.5% increase in rates for 2016 and 2017, and a 2% from 2018 to 2020. There's only one spending package that came forward for the water fund, and that is the public works shop water line servicing. So this is a new shop that they're putting in down Public Works, so they'll need water line servicing for that. The 20-year capital plan for the water fund, you see, is a total of $54 million over the 20 years. 2016 and 2017, of course, is $10 million each year, which with the construction of the river intake and the water treatment plant. And again, we're listing the sources of funding, whether it's operations, DCCs, long-term grant, etc. The actual financial plan for the water, again, is showing surpluses in every year of the plan, and then when the non-operating side comes in as well, we actually dip into a little bit of a deficit in 2016 and 17, but they are offset by the surplus amounts in the unrestricted fund. And at the end of the day, in 2016, the water fund shows a balance, is projected to have a balance of $6.8 million, and at the end of 2025, there'll be a balance of $5.8 million. And part of this reason is why it's so high. Earlier, we had phase 2 of the ERWS much earlier in the program, around 2023, 2024. Those have been moved out to 2030. So the surpluses remain a little bit higher until phase 2 of the ERWS program comes to fruition. So we'll move on to the sewer fund. In 2016 to 2020, the building blocks are rate increases of 5%. Spending packages, there's 3 spending packages for the sewer fund. Both of the lift stations are going to get an upgrade for $35,000 each, and the public works shop that required the water line is also going to require a sewer line servicing as well. Capital, 20-year capital numbers for the sewer is only $5 million, $5.8 million, and the funding sources are listed there for you to see. The financial plan itself is looking pretty good. We've got unrestricted surpluses going in for each year, or sorry, coming out each year. With the unrestricted surplus at the end of the years going from 2.1 approximately million down to 433,000. But you will notice in 2023 we do actually go into the negative in that surplus. So hopefully we'll be able to maintain surpluses within the sewer to help offset that in 2023 when we come to it. So basically that's it for my presentation. So
my agenda, I have, it's not council's input, it's members of the gallery. Any members of the gallery who would like to provide comment or questions to council? Yes, do you want to come up and use the microphone, please?
I speak loud.
All right, you can yell. Moment. Yes.
Live.
Oh yeah, we're live on stream. You've got to come to the microphone. Sorry about that. Name and address, please. Microphone's not on. Put them on. Okay,
Sorry.
now we're good to go. Did somebody turn the lights up?
Lodgepole Drive. Having just received this stuff this evening, of course, I mean, I'm not a whiz accountant, so I can't look at it and come up with all kinds of numbers, but I will for the next time around. But I do have some questions that have arisen. Number one, what is an insight program?
Who's going to answer that? Mrs. Comas?
You're spending $5,000. I know it's not a lot of money, but what is it?
The Insights program is it's a facilitated program for building highly efficient work teams within the city. It's a program that is in wide use across organizations like Coast Capital Credit Union and others that work on building strong employee work teams and employee relationships.
An efficiency program.
Yes.
Thank you. A question regarding the demolition of 183 McVickers. I'm not overly familiar with that building, but spending $40,000 to demolish it and then sell an empty lot, why not just sell it as is, where is, because there's plenty of houses like that that are being sold right now in the $250,000 to $300,000 range.
If I'm not mistaken, I think the building's pretty dilapidated. Mr. Squire?
Yes, through your worship. It is fairly dilapidated. Obviously, there hasn't been a lot of capital into it. There's no use for the city. There's also asbestos removal. It's very, very expensive these days. That
Yes.
building it's at the age where it has to get asbestos abatement. So
Right, and the new buyer would probably have to look after that, right?
I guess that's a liability the city would take on.
Oh, well. Okay, on our surpluses that we have, what is the total surplus that we have right now, or as of December 31st projected?
In the overall total surplus for the city?
Yep, unrestricted surplus.
Do you have that on hand? Director of Finance?
$5.7 million.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. And what is the water surplus while you got this out? $8.7 million. And the sewer surplus, please, while you're at it. Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions I got for now.
I'm sure. Anyone else have any questions before we move on? I know we're looking at it all for the first time, but before I go back to council, anybody from the audience? There'll be other meetings. This won't be the only meeting we're going to have. There'll be lots of other meetings between now and the time the budget's adopted. Yes, Ms. Hoffer.
I just have a simple question. When will it be?
To be on camera, you're going to have to come to the microphone. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Elaine Hofer, 655 Temple Street, Parksville. My question is very simple. I want to know when the more elaborate spreadsheets are going to be on the internet so that I can see them. That's all. And I thought I wouldn't have to come down here to ask it, but
we've got some spreadsheets tonight, but is it online? Not yet? Okay. All right. But they will be.
tomorrow morning. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from the audience? Going once, going twice. Okay. So, pardon me? So now we're moving back into council deliberations. And again, council, I've said it, I think this is the third time I'm going to say it. You know, this is the beginning. This is the first kick at the cat. I hope the SPCA will forgive me for saying that, but this is the first iteration of the budget, so we can start questioning this evening. And let's go. Anybody from council have any questions on the budget, on what's been presented so far? Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just will slowly go through what I've marked just for tonight. So I'm just wondering with the McVickers Street House, if we considered having it moved, like selling it to one of those moving companies who take them away, and I don't know what they do. They put them on the side of the road somewhere and sell them. Have we considered that, just moving it off the property?
Yes, through your worship, through Councillor Salter. In previous, like the adjacent properties on Jansen Street, I believe we had 3. Those were things that we did review and analyze. Some of those buildings weren't salvageable. It's consideration looking at the disrepair that the current existing building is right now, and the potential, the asbestos abatement to sell that building. It's not cost effective. $40,000 is a budget. Previously, I think we were upwards near, just for the houses adjacent to us on Jensen Street, near $30,000 to demolish it. But again, it's dependent on the market. It's just a budget to remove that building. And again, it's for council's consideration.
Okay. So I do have other, not even on this question, but I have other questions that I've marked. Okay. I just finish them and then move on. So thank you for that. So this isn't, follow up. And so the Community Park Sports cistern, I see there's 2 cisterns actually, and they're $280,000. So I'm wondering, what does that look like, this cistern? What is it that we're trying to build here?
Okay, Councillor, I'm sorry, Mr. Squire, you're not a councillor yet.
Yes, Your Worship. A cistern, essentially what it is, it's a means of capturing water from the irrigation from the field. Essentially what it is a water savings concept borrowed from past practice, where you recapture the rainwater into an area where you hold it and reuse it back on for irrigation purposes back on the sports field. The sports field at the community park is primarily sand-based. Most of that water does, with the sand-based field, it's required as part of the recreational. If we didn't have that, it wouldn't uphold to the use. So with a sand field, the downfall of that, the majority of the water does seep through into the underdrains of the field and then is essentially wasted into our storm drain system and goes out to into the foreshore. What the cistern does is actually capture that water into a holding tank, an underground holding tank, for reuse as irrigation back onto the field. Okay. So there's a cost savings there over time for water reuse.
I think the experience of this past summer too has a lot to do with what we're planning on doing, because we had to keep watering that field, otherwise we would have lost it. Yeah.
So what you're saying, I think you're saying, is you'll be watering the field, the water will be recaptured like they do at the car wash, and then you'll reuse it again and then capture it. And okay. And community park clubhouse and washrooms. We just did a $50,000 upgrade just this year, and so now we've got a $500,000. I don't know, is that an upgrade or are we rebuilding for the $500,000? So that one's community park clubhouse and washrooms.
Check the year. I think it's
I see that.
way off.
I see that, but it's still a lot of money, and I'm questioning it. So we don't think it's going to last?
Certainly, Your Worship, I can speak towards that. The clubhouse is something that has been brought forward in the past and is currently as part of the existing master community park plan. Again, depending on the results of the master community park plan, if we go forward with that next year, that is one of the questions that would arise. The clubhouse is also something other user groups have asked for, and even at one point the Rotary had interest in providing or helping build the clubhouse as well.
Mr. Manson, you want to add to that?
If I may, Your Worship, for further clarification, this is over and above the washrooms by the by the waterfront. This is for a clubhouse and washrooms by the sports field, something that isn't there right now, so it's a completely new building.
Okay. And so to follow up on that one, but you're saying you think the Rotary Club might be interested in assisting with that as well?
At one point in time, they were interested. I don't know what the status is right now. But any other user groups in District 69 have also expressed interest. I don't know, but this would be the city's full funding.
Portion.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be the full funding. So it may not be the city's portion, though. Right. Okay. And then one last question is, in the water budget, we're talking about the costs and the operating costs and so on, but where is the aquifer storage piece in here? Has that been included? Has it been rolled into this, or is it separate, or will it be separated out, or where is that piece?
What's the question? Is the actual what?
In the water budget, the operating budget and the water budget, the capital plan, but there's nothing about the aquifer storage piece and the costs for that.
I didn't get, what did you say before piece? What's the word before piece? Storage piece? Oh, aquifer storage and recovery is not in this budget.
Yeah, I'm saying, we're looking at we're looking at a capital plan. We're looking at the spending costs, the operating costs over 20 years. So if we're using aquifer storage, where is that piece in this? Because that was the plan, was to use an aquifer to store the water. Is that not right?
Yes, through your worship, it's in actually year 2021, so it's not in the 5-year financial. It's in it's in the overall 20-year capital plan, so but it's in the 5-year financial.
Okay.
Here we go.
So you've got the aquifer storage in 2021, starting in 2021. That's where the costs are being captured? Okay.
But that's a bridge that people will have to cross over time. That's just a planning figure. So if the council of the day decides to do it or not do it, that'll be their decision.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Worship. I had a question about the sewer fund. I'm just wondering if my understanding is that there are some necessary upgrades that are going to be made to the sewage treatment plant, and I'm wondering if we know approximately how much that is and if that's what is reflected in here.
A lot of the cost of the upgrading of the sewage plant will be done through the RDN budget. We'll be a little bit impacted by that, but I believe that the amount of impact shouldn't be too great because a lot of it's going to be covered by DCCs. So, but those figures are not finalized yet. That's why they're not in here. Councillor Rhodes.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The projected unrestricted surpluses, I understand the 2016 to 2020 we've had outlined what we think the projected increases are, but from the years 2020 to 2025, what are the projected surpluses? Are they based on what we think the increases are going to be? Is that based on the 4% continuing on for the general fund and the whatever it was, the 5% for the sewer and the 2.5 or 5% for the water and 2.5 for the other? Whatever got? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Director of Finance, or
I think she's just switching. I think it's 3% in the general fund, but she's just going to go there after, or is it? How long does the 4 go out? Okay, so to 2022 is 4, and then 3's after that. That's the general fund tax increases. And the sewer, and it gets 7 there, and the reason there's 7 there is because that's when the RCMP, that's when our population is projected at 15,000, and our RCMP bill will go up substantially in that year. When we hit 15,000, the funding formula changes from the province. So we put that in there as a massive tax increase in that year, 2030. The sewer is 5% in all the years, and the water, I think, is 2% in all the years after the first 2.
Follow-up, so Mr. Councillor Rhodes? No? Anybody? Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. I have to say, when I saw this 4.5% and 4.0%, I was kind of like, but then if you look at the inflation rate, and I think we have been frozen at the inflation rate, which means we can only, in the past, we could only cover the costs of what we already had, so there was no increases, and this reflects that, because you're asking for things that we have put off or not approved in previous years. Okay, so just so I understand that. I just have one thing for the fire department. The paving, replacement of the pavers, what would that be? Because that was just done, wasn't it?
Chief Banks.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Powell. When we did the fire hall addition, we had the Grass Creek pavers put in. They're not working out as we had hoped. It's actually a bit of a safety hazard for us, where we had actually one of our members tripped and fell and ended up breaking his hand, caught it on the pavers and that. So to use that surface for any sort of training, we go to put ladders, try and put ladders up around the back of the hall where those pavers are, and it's not a safe condition to put it up. And for training, we try and keep it as safe as we can.
Following up on Councillor Powell's comments, I want to remind everybody that last year we had a 1.5% tax increase, which was tough to get at, and certain councillors wanted a 0% tax increase.
I'm not looking.
Okay. Anyway, but this is the old story. It's what happens if you don't keep a certain level going. You get caught up in this thing, and you've got to pay the piper at some point in time. Anyway, question. Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Worship. We'll talk about the 4% later. But anyways, I'm a little confused with the health and safety officer. We're hiring. I realize that. We approved that this year. Now we got an emergency program coordinator, and it looks like in this year we're also looking at a bylaw enforcing officer. So I'm not quite clear on those three positions and who's doing them.
Okay, currently we have a 1.6 bylaw officer, and after the 0.6, the rest of that 0.4 time for that bylaw officer is taken up with emergency planning, which is a legislated requirement. In the current budget for 2016, there is a request for an additional regular full-time bylaw enforcement officer, as there was in the 2015 budget. So that would bring the bylaw enforcement complement up to 2.6 bylaw enforcement officers for the city in 2017 or in 2016 if council were to approve this budget. Currently, the emergency preparedness and planning function is done through the fire department. For that particular position, the fire chief is the deputy chief emergency planning coordinator, whatever title he has in that role, and the chief bylaw enforcement officer is a .4 emergency planning coordinator. In most municipalities, that is a full-time standalone position. The extent of the work that is required is far exceeding the ability of the people that are currently doing the job. The city of Parksville has a large volunteer contingent of people to assist in emergency planning, particularly the radio operators. Unfortunately, given the demographic of those people, that responsibility is, we aren't going to be able to fully staff it, from my understanding, in the future because of the demographic, and they're working really hard to try to attract younger volunteers for that position. The outreach into the community and the training for the citizens to help prepare them for emergencies is limited at best because we don't have the time or the resources to be able to do that. And I think it's fairly common knowledge now with the work that's being done on emergency planning that people need to be self-sufficient for at least the first 72 hours in a disaster. And in order to be able to do that, we need to be able to educate our populace, and we really don't have the resources to be able to do that. The other part of it is training of city employees and others who will be required to staff the emergency command center whenever it's activated. And right now, we don't have the resources to do that to adequate levels. So by bringing in a full-time emergency program coordinator, we hope to make inroads into better preparing our citizens and our staff to be able to address an emergency when or if it happens. When we do that, the emergency program coordinator will report to the chief bylaw inspector, chief bylaw enforcement officer, so that would bring him into a position of looking after the bylaw, and it would give us additional resources from his expertise on the bylaw side, as well as give us a full-time person plus his expertise on the emergency planning side. So it would give us a substantial increase in our ability to address the various needs and responsibilities we have for emergency planning.
So what I gather then is that we're already hiring the health and safety person. We're going to hire a full-time emergency programmer.
Well, if I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Greer, there is no correlation between the occupational health and safety person and the emergency planning coordinator?
I'm just mentioning the people that we're hiring. So then we hire another bylaw. So we'll have 3 full-time bylaw enforcing officers. So we eliminate that one person that's doing half days now or whatever.
Well, no, basically what we have are 2 full-time bylaw officers, plus we have a person who is responsible for the bylaw function and the emergency planning function. And so he will still be dividing his time, perhaps more on a more even basis between bylaw and emergency planning, wherever the greatest need arises. But basically what we're looking at is bylaw and emergency program coordination within the same department.
So for emergency programmer, if we hire a full-time guy, now we're going to have 1 full-time guy and a half a guy?
Mr. Manson.
In essence, right now, for both bylaw compliance and emergency preparedness, we have 2 people, or 2 full-time equivalents. We'll end up with 4.
Yeah, we will. So we'll have 1 extra bylaw enforcing officer. Yeah. My idea, and of course we're just starting on this, but unless we change the policy of how we operate the bylaw enforcing department, we can hire 2 or 3 or 4 more bylaw enforcing officers, and I don't see where that's going to help us much unless we change the policy and how we conduct that department.
Well, Your Worship, through to Councillor Greer, that's entirely a Council's prerogative. The direction that we follow is the direction that we have from Council in their policy. If Council wishes to change that, we can.
Right. Okay.
But I would also like to draw to your attention that this past summer, although we don't do enforcement in the community park per se, we had an increased issue of people camping in the park and causing some problems for our summer students. And so our bylaw officers, throughout the course of the summer, with the RCMP, were in the park at 6:30 to 7 o'clock every morning for several weeks to go through the park and make it safe for our employees. As Council is aware, there's been a recent court decision with respect to the ability of people to camp overnight in parks. And so we are going to be working over the coming year to look at the court decision, look at the impact it's going to have for local governments and what we could be facing come the next summer season with respect to that issue, not just at the community park, but in any community, any park. So that could be Springwood, that could be pocket parks, that could be anywhere in the community. And so hopefully with additional bylaw resources, we are going to be better positioned to try. I'm not saying that we will be successful 100%, but at least to be able to try to manage that coming problem.
Thank you.
The other aspect to this too, Ms. Comas, and you and I have talked about that, is we're going to be re-looking at our bylaws, especially in light of things like unsightly property, so we can put more teeth into them, if we can. I know there's legalities involved here. Councillor Oates.
This the increase to the bylaw department is based on the assumption that the policy remains as is with respect to enforcement. So I would imagine that if council were to change that policy, that would in effect necessitate the need for how many more bylaw officers? Or I guess I guess you'd have to see what the policy changes is. But
yes, I mean right now the policy that we operate on is one of compliance. So in many respects, we talk to people and try to get them to comply to the bylaws, and we write them letters. And then if they are unwilling to cooperate, at that point we ticket them. So if we were to change our process, then we would probably be going to something I would imagine that would be more enforcement-based, in which case there wouldn't be a desire for obtaining compliance so much as there would be for just issuing tickets.
Okay, Councillor Salter, Councillor Patterson, and then Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not sure whether to direct it to accounting or to the fire department. When we're looking at the operating budget on page 7, and we have a fire department casual position in operating, is that an office administrative position? It's fire department casual position.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Patterson, no, it's not a office position. It's for some other special projects and other items that come up throughout the year where we need to get somebody in to help out and do it. The idea would be to utilize the current volunteers and be able to bring them in on a daily wage, I guess, if you will, to do certain work that requires to be done, like hose testing, ladder testing. There's a myriad of other duties that aren't really getting done now, and to rely on the volunteers coming in on their own to do it is not becoming realistic.
Follow-up? So this amount of money could be spread over multiple people? It's not an actual part-time position. You'll look at it throughout the volunteer fire department.
Your Worship, through to Council Patterson, that's correct. Yeah, it would be based on availability of the current volunteers who would be available to come in.
So that amount would be continuing on in yearly budget planning?
That's the plan right now.
Okay. Follow-up on page 8, in future years, 2017 to 2020, you have a fire department assistant at $84,000. So what does that position entail?
Your Worship, through Councillor Patterson, that's correct. That's a full-time position. We had originally had it in 2016.
So would that be like a deputy?
It'd be
chief or
and it
whatever?
wouldn't be a chief officer position, but it's just a full-time position for other duties around the hall, help with inspections, public education, maintenance, and that. This was a position that was identified in our strategic plan. It was approved in the 2011 budget and was when the hiring freeze was put on. At that time, it was removed from the budget, so we're just putting it back in the budget now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have, okay, one is in 2018 we've got an HR advisor. Do we, page 8? Do we not already have an HR advisor? So this would be a new position. And an engineering technician? would also be a new. So these are two new positions that we're looking at. Okay. I have one more. I just want to write that. One more. So I've got one more here. Yeah, you go ahead. She'll do it while I... Oh, I've got it.
Found it?
So for the bylaw officer, we're talking about another FTE, which would be about $80,000 a year over the next 5 years, so $400,000. And basically, we need that person because we've got new legislation with regard to people sleeping in parks, people who are, I'm assuming, people who have no homes are probably the folks that we're considering. Am I correct, or are these normal campers that just don't want to pay?
No, these aren't normal campers. A lot of them are transients or people just moving through in the summertime and who don't either have the funds, or sometimes they're homeless people. I mean, there's a variety. But the bylaw enforcement officer has been placed in the budget in previous years as well. The volume of calls that we get, because we respond on a complaint basis. So we don't go out and look for infractions. We respond only to complaints. And so the volume of complaints that we have is beyond the ability of people, of the current staff complement, to be able to respond to in a timely manner. We had up to 3-week wait lists for responses for our files this summer. And then we had additional new challenges, which was the sleeping in the park, and then we had the water enforcement as well, which we hadn't done before, and which, because of the priority of water conservation, particularly in drought scenarios, that we made a much higher priority than our other calls. So from a bylaw enforcement officer position, this has been something we have required for some time, and the volume of calls are just getting higher and higher with every year, and we just don't have the manpower to be able to address them all.
So just for a follow-up, I know this has come up in the past, so I'm wondering, would it be possible to get some numbers? Like, I know you don't have them tonight, I don't need numbers tonight, but over time, could we get, maybe over the month, get some numbers so that we can then, so we have something tangible that we can look at and go, well, look, this is what's happening, does it make sense or not?
Mrs. Comas, yeah. I think you have those numbers, do you not?
We have provided them in the past, and we can certainly provide them again. We track them on a monthly basis. But for instance, in the month of July, we had 389 complaint files. That's just unheard of. We've never had those kinds of numbers.
Right. And so if we could get the numbers and what was the complaint? What was it? Was it water or was it
they're water,
the
they're unsightly properties, they're animal control, they're parking. We can certainly provide you with all sorts of.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Mrs. Comas, I think also that what we'd like to see is the averages of what a bylaw officer is carrying compared to what a normal workload would be. We know, for example, that doctors is 1 to 1,200 people, and in Oceanside it's like 1 to 2,500 people. We've got a doctor shortage. Who's next? Councillor Patterson.
Cool. Okay. Page 7, the LED streetlight replacement. And is that anything that we can look at with grants from Hydro? Or is that how the the street light replacement or whatever, how long does that last for? I'm not sure who to direct the question to, the LED lighting.
Mr. Squire.
Yes, through your worship, it's an ongoing program. It's an annual program to replace our existing street lights where possible with LEDs. There is obviously a savings over the lifetime of that infrastructure with using LEDs in replacement of the halogen bulbs that we currently have. So it again, some of our the shoebox style lamp standards in local residential areas are getting near their replacement, and this kind of needs a fund to actually help with that, with the capital replacement of those. And LED, with the advancements of that technology in the last 5 years, has allowed it to be cost beneficial.
Another? New question, page 10, on new spending packages for the bulk fuel storage and backup generator. Could I get a little bit more information? It's a $380,000 line item.
Yeah, that's the, currently down at Public Works, we have no backup power. What we do use, any other building that we do have typically has backup power, like PCTC here. Being in operations, being an emergency place where we have to, if need be, be in operations 24/7 in the event of a storm and a power outage, there is no ability. We lose our power. What we have to do is hook up currently what we do is hook up a welding machine to our existing building, and it powers up a couple PCs that allow us to communicate with our SCADA system and our water system. So it's its portion of it. Obviously, the water treatment plant will need to be fully backed up. So in event of a power, it has its own budget for that. But the existing facility and the new shop doesn't have a budget for it, and that's what that is.
Any chance of using solar or partly solar in this, or?
There is. It's not, certainly solar technology isn't there yet. You have to have a banked power. Solar obviously collects a lot of energy during, yeah.
Okay. I have, are you finished, Councillor Patterson? I have a few questions. The paid call-out system implementation, we don't have it now? For $60,000, we don't have a paid, oh, I'm sorry. I lost my page. Paid 60,000, 5 to 60,000. Page 8? Page 8. The paid call system implementation, we don't have that now.
Your Worship, the current way that the volunteers are reimbursed for responding to emergency calls and regular Monday night training is we have a lump sum, and it gets divided up at the end of the year amongst all the members, depending on the number of calls and practices that they attend. What a lot of departments are doing is they've moved to sort of like an hourly rate system that I think would be a little more equitable for the members responding, and might make them might make it easier for them to respond to calls of longer duration. Right now, the way we do it, it doesn't matter if the call is 5 minutes or 5 hours, they get the same amount of pay. And also, it doesn't matter if the person's been with us for 5 days or 15 years, it's the same rate. And in a lot of cases, the responsibility level of the officers, they're getting the same rate, if you will, as the person coming in the door that they have to give direction to. So it doesn't equate, with the responsibilities and that. So what we were looking at is a system that is a little more equitable, recognizes the senior firefighters and the officers and that a bit more for their skills and training that they have, and the newer guys would, obviously they'd start out at the bottom and work their way up.
Thank you. The bleachers in the volleyball park, it's not a lot of money, it's $25,000. That's coming from the fact that the volleyball tournaments are getting more and more frequent and more popular. We're getting into almost provincial-wide volleyball tournaments. Are they going to be the bleachers that we see that can be moved about, or?
Yeah, there's also there's a concrete pad that's required. Obviously, we just can't put them on bare grass because of trip and fall claims. So yes, you can move them, but they're the ones that'll be anchored down, the aluminum types, the low standing, like we have.
I don't know about the rest of council. I feel like I've just eaten a great big turkey dinner. Do we have any more questions? Councillor Oates.
The paid call system implementation, that would be a carry forward then every single year. It costs us an extra 60 grand each year, or is it just 60 grand for the implementation?
Your worship, through the council, that would be an annual. Item. It's different than the way we're doing it.
As well with the fire department, the standby pay, it's identified as a new spending package. What are we currently doing?
Your worship, through to Councillor Oates, currently we're doing nothing. The chief officers, we are on standby. For example, this week I'm on duty this week basically 24/7. So there's no, like after hours, there's no compensation at all. We're in town. Our salaries are based on the 35-hour week. And between the three chief officers, we're probably doing 9,600 hours? 9,600 hours a year of standby, where we're required to be in town and available to respond.
And that's the three positions that's the three positions. This money would be going towards three positions?
Yeah, that would be like a standby pay for being on duty after hours for the three chief officers.
Just for council's information, we've had this discussion with victim services with the RCMP, and this is a District 69 Oceanside issue, and they've also come for paid call-out systems because the people are volunteering, and it's just getting somebody's on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's pretty irritating to get a call at 2 o'clock in the morning and have to do your normal performance, and those increases have been granted. Pardon me? Yeah. Any further questions tonight, Councillor? Or do we want to go home and start digesting and looking at greater detail and setting a date for another meeting? What's your pleasure?
Yeah, that's it.
Everybody's okay? Next meeting, we have a date for the next meeting? November the 9th. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Can look at them. Can I have a motion to, I need to read this out properly. Pursuant to Section 91C of the Community Charter, Council proceed to a closed meeting to consider items relating to labor. So moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by. Thank you. So thank you, folks, for coming. You're very, very good for coming. Thank you. Appreciate it.